So the major tournaments for this weekend just wrapped up for Pokemon Pocket, and we have what I think is the most exciting meta development we have seen yet. There potentially might be a new S-tier deck to join the ranks of Pikachu and Mewtwo, and if this is true, it could really break open the meta. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, be sure to like and sub. I upload Pokemon TCG Pocket almost every single day. The support has been amazing, so thank you guys. So we need to lay some ground rules first. Going into this weekend, Mewtwo and Pikachu EX are the two top decks. By far. The matchups that Mewtwo and Pikachu have overall are better than any other deck. Playing anything else is honestly just trolling. Now, you can play something like Starmie or something like Charizard, but the problem is that you take one really good matchup to either Mewtwo or Pikachu, but a really bad matchup to the either. With Mewtwo and Pikachu both making up about 30% meta share each, it's going to be very hard for you to place well because you're guaranteed to run into some of them. And when you run into some of them, when you have such an abysmal matchup, you're probably going to lose. It's going to take you out of the tournament. It just doesn't make sense to play a deck that isn't Mewtwo or Pikachu right now. But that might be changing. And what we're going to look at for this is Charizard EX. So let's go a little bit more in depth on Charizard. Charizard takes a pretty decent Mewtwo EX matchup, 56%. That's because Charizard is trying to set up a stage 2. Mewtwo's also trying to set up a stage 2 in order to start sweeping. Well, setting up a stage 2 and just the way that Charizard plays, you're not attacking with Moltres, you're using it to build up Charizard, you're not really putting pressure on. It takes a very abysmal Pikachu matchup. 35% here, 39%, 37%, 38%. It's been very hard for Charizard to win a tournament. I don't even think it's won a tournament over 500 people. So what Charizard players did is they took a look at these matchup spreads, looked at the stats and said, we need a better way to beat Pikachu. What else can we pair with Moltres? And what they settled on was Arcanine. We saw Arcanine pop up in the meta and do very, very well against Pikachus. This deck farms Pikachu. Okay, 60%, 63%, 72%, 70%. This deck farms Pikachu, but we look at the Mewtwo matchup, it tanked all the way down to 32%. That's not good. This is still not a winning strategy. Sure, you could play Arcanine, and if your tournament run is you play against 8 Pikachus, okay, you're gonna go 8-0, most likely if you play well and draws go your way. So it's fine to counter the Pikachus, but you still have the glaring weakness of just losing to Mewtwo 70% of the time. Now, this is where things get very interesting. Players are realizing we need a way to beat Pikachu. So this first option that players decided to try was by adding one of the baby Charizard. What does this do? Baby Charizard against Pikachu is a perfectly fine attacker. Baby Charizard is not going to get knocked out by a Pikachu. It's going to need 3 heads from a Zapdos, and it's going to need a Giovanni from a Raichu if it attacks you. It's still going to do the 150 and knock out everything in front of it from the Pikachu. What this really does is it offers you just a little bit more consistency. If you can get into Charmeleon, okay, now you have 3 outs to a Charizard instead of just the regular 2, which is the thing that Charizard struggles with the most, consistency. This list actually did insanely well in the Ursa Day tournament. 1,700 players. It placed in top 4, I think 4th place. But the deck I'm the absolute most excited for is this right here. Charizard EX plus Arcanine. We take the good Mewtwo matchup of Charizard and the good Pikachu matchup of Arcanine and combine them. So you might look at this list and say, things look a little bit strange here to me. Why are we only playing one Growlithe? It's very simple. This deck is still at its core a Charizard deck. The game plan is still try to set up Charizard because that is like the ultimate win condition. A setup Charizard beats any deck almost all of the time, right? It's just 200. It does not get one shot, do 200 again. Okay, it's so strong. So on that point, let's say you start Charmander and you need that Moltres. You need to get into that Moltres and start accelerating energy onto your Pokemon. You have a Pokeball in your hand. You want that Pokeball to find you Moltres. If you're playing 2 Growlithe, now your outs to Pokeball are you can either find your other Charmander, one of your 2 Moltres, or one of your 2 Growlithe. By only playing 1 Growlithe, we limit those odds. We make it more likely that we find the Moltres off of the Pokeball. So you never want to play 2 Growlithe. You're never going to use 2 Arcanine in one game. It's just asking too much, and it's going to muddy things up more than it helps. The Arcanine is here in case that things are going a little bit slow on setting up your Charizard. If you're playing against Pikachu and you're slow to set up your Charizard, you need that Arcanine. And Arcanine can sometimes just win you that Pikachu matchup. I mean, if you go Arcanine attack into a Pikachu, they send up the Zapdos because it doesn't get one shot. Okay, you use your Sabrina, bring up something off the bench, knock that out with Arcanine. There you go. Arcanine just took all 3 prizes. This deck has the potential to totally shake up the meta, and I'm going to get into why, but first let's go over its results for the week. So what we have here first is the Ursa Day Pocket Weekly. This is where the deck sort of popped up. A couple Japanese players decided to run this list. One of them got top 32, I think 27th place, but the main highlight here is Hayato, who got 5th place with this deck. That is an incredible showcasing of this deck. You look at his matchups, he mostly went up against Pikachus and Mewtwo's, so it's doing well against those matchups. The real highlight here is what Tony Zero was able to do. I believe he ran almost the exact same list as that Ursa Day, but he ended up winning this tournament. Why is that a big deal? This is the first time since the game has officially released that a tournament over 500 players has been won by something that wasn't Mewtwo or Pikachu. So why do I think this is so much more impactful than just there being a third S tier deck? Let's take a look at the total meta share from these decks. So you have Mewtwo and Pikachu that have been on top. There is no real reason for a Mewtwo or a Pikachu player to switch off, okay? If you're playing Mewtwo, you know you're taking a pretty good matchup against Pikachu. You know you're taking a fine matchup against Charizard. You're taking a fine matchup against Starmie. Really, still, the only thing you need to be worried about is Pikachu, right? Because that's 25% to 30% of the meta share. This is the only matchup to be concerned about. Why would I switch off of Mewtwo for a deck that's going to have a worse matchup across the board? Maybe a Mewtwo player converts to Pikachu, and that makes sense. But why would a Mewtwo go from playing Mewtwo to going to Starmie, right? Like, okay, now my Pikachu matchup is better, but I just lose hard to Mewtwo. Okay, I might go to Charizard and I take a better Mewtwo matchup, but now I just lose harder to Pikachu. There's no reason for Mewtwo players to convert to other decks. Similarly, there's no reason for Pikachu players to convert to other decks except for Mewtwo, or for Mewtwo to switch to Pikachu. Zero reason at all. Now we have a third deck that looks like it takes a decent matchup against both Pikachu and Mewtwo. Now you might see some players that are playing Mewtwo or Pikachu convert to this Charizard Arcanine deck. Okay, so now the meta gets a little bit more diluted. We're now no longer running into Mewtwo or Pikachu 60% of the time in a tournament. Well, that opens the door for decks like Starmie Articuno, for Marowak Sandslash. Okay, because what Starmie Articuno does, Starmie takes a great matchup against Mewtwo. It takes a great matchup against Charizard. If these three all have, I don't know, 20% meta share, and I can guarantee 2 good matchups against these two, yeah, I might play Starmie now because I know I'm going to beat any Charizard I see. I know I'm going to beat any Mewtwo I see. Sure, I'm going to take a bad matchup to the Pikachu, but if I'm knocking out 2 of the 3 meta decks, that sounds good to me. So just by diluting the meta a little bit and splitting it between 3 decks, things could really open up. I don't think we're going to see it this week. I think next week we're going to see Charizard and Arcanine do very, very well, cement itself as a true S tier deck. And I think the following week after that, it's going to be the time for decks like Starmie Articuno, Ninetales Rapidash, Marowak Sandslash to really show that, hey, now we're like actual counter picks to the meta. We're not just beating one of the top meta decks. We're beating 2 of them. We can place well. So yeah, guys, I hope all of that made sense to you. I'm super excited. I think that give us 2 more weeks and this meta is going to be so much more than just Mewtwo, Gardevoir, and Pikachu. So on the sidelines, way less impactful, but still pretty interesting, we have the story of Greninja with some new partners. This first one I'm showing you here is Greninja paired with Articuno. Just seems like a different way to play the Greninja Starmie deck. It functions pretty similarly, I would guess. Just Articuno, you know, big EX water type attacker. Greninja's there to like buff out some damage problems that you might have. We have the one of Articuno, the baby Articuno, to, you know, just cheese some of that paralysis lock in there as well. It seems like a pretty logical deck to me. I mean, if Starmie's doing well with it, maybe Articuno can do well with it. Let's try it out. This ended up getting, I believe it was 17th place in the Ursa Day Pocket Weekly. Again, that's 17th out of 1,700 players. So this deck did pretty well for itself. Yeah, just a standard take on Greninja with a big water guy. But this next one I'm going to show you is way stranger and pretty cool. So this is the 17th place deck. The deck I showed you previously actually got 13th place, both in the same tournament out of 1,700 people. Still an insane result. So this is Greninja plus Kangaskhan plus Mewtwo. When I first heard this list, I could not fathom how this could ever work. It seemed like it made no sense to me, but after playing it, yeah, I get it. I understand how this works. So what you want to do with this deck, it's a dual type deck, by the way, you play both Water and Psychic, is you use Kangaskhan and Greninja to set up your early game and just make your opponent go through these two things while you set up the Mewtwo in the back to get in and do Mewtwo things, just one-shot whatever's in front of it. I played it. It flows pretty well. It's an enjoyable deck to play. It's something very different, very unique. You have kind of, a few lines of play when you have 3 different attackers, right? Sometimes you're attacking with a Kangaskhan. Sometimes it makes more sense to go into the Greninja than a second Kangaskhan. It's just very fun and very interesting to play. So yeah, super interesting list. Right now, I'd say it's probably more like a B tier list. It's still a threat that can do well, but I don't think I'd give it quite that A tier rank of Arcanine and Starmie. I might be proven wrong in the future, but that's just my first take on it. So that is going to be it for the meta update this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to like and sub to the channel. I'm super excited where this game's headed. We keep seeing different meta developments. We're going to keep seeing meta developments, and then we're going to get a new set. So all the people who thought that this game was stale, just Mewtwo and Pikachu, seems like you're wrong. Seems like it's going to keep evolving, and I'm just so excited for the future of this game.